Welcome to the Freedom Club Podcast, where we discover the fight for freedom, fulfillment, passion, and purpose. Your host is Curt Mercadante, Gallup certified strengths coach, an agency founder who is dedicated to coaching individuals seeking to level up their life and their businesses. The Freedom Club is about unlocking your talents, turning them into strengths, and crushing your objectives. You can learn more at curtmercadante.com. Welcome to the Freedom Club.
And welcome to the Freedom Club Podcast. I'm your host, Curt Mercadante. It is Thursday, June 21st, which means it's time for the Thursday interview segment. Every Thursday, I bring you an interview with a business leader or some other all-around interesting person. And every Monday is the Monday Motivator segment, in which I bring you a short burst of motivation to help you kick your week off on the right foot. And for today's segment, I bring you some interviews I did with three very special individuals, and today we're going to focus on fear. Because if you want to escape to a life of freedom and fulfillment, often the most important thing you have to do, the first thing you have to do is overcome the fear to escape a life that maybe has been slowly sucking your soul for decades, right? A lifestyle, a career, a workplace, a job in which you feel trapped, but you're in a comfort zone, right? Maybe you're getting a nice paycheck. Maybe it's what you've known since you were in your early 20s. And so overcoming that fear to escape can sometimes be extremely difficult. And I've talked here before on this podcast about how I escaped from my previous career. Listen, I had a very successful public relations and ad agency for 13 years, and I shut it down at peak revenue because I was unfulfilled, and I was sick and tired of being unfulfilled, but it was scary, right? But I did it. And I've talked about my journey, and today we're going to hear from three very special individuals about how they overcame fear to escape to a life of freedom and fulfillment. And so first up, we are going to hear from Michael Henson. Michael and I have never met in person, but we've met on LinkedIn. Michael recently left his job as a school teacher to be a full-time, unashamed creative. He's now owner of Henson Creative. He's a wonderful storyteller. He's a speaker. He's a creative mastermind. He's launching his podcast, The Unashamed Creative. And here we have Michael Henson talking about how he overcame fear to escape to his life of freedom and fulfillment.
So for the longest time, my biggest fear in taking a leap and pursuing my passions and my dreams full time was letting my wife and my family down. You know, I've been married since I was 19, and my responsibilities have always been at the forefront of my mind, taking care of bills, helping contribute to household income, and all of the fun stuff that goes into building a life together. My wife and I have been in it together from, the year after we graduated from high school. So that was huge for me. And I didn't realize that my fears were misplaced, or that I had been hiding my fears under this disguise of family responsibility until my wife came to me and told me, you just need to go for it. Like, it's time for you to take the leap and do what you love, because you're not going to find another job that's going to give you that level of fulfillment. And you're never going to be happy or excited about it until you've at least tried it. So when she had that conversation with me and I started processing it, I quickly became aware of the fact that my fear wasn't letting my wife down or my daughter down, or failing somehow in the household structure that, I've come to uphold and value. I began to realize that the fear that I was experiencing was fear of failure, fear that I would let myself down, and fear that I would not be able to accomplish those hopes and dreams. once I realized that, it was really, really eye-opening. And it made the things that people like Curt and Fraser and Quentin and all of these other guys that I follow that are living that passion-based lifestyle make sense. Their messages and their comments began to, just make sense to me, that, it was fear holding me back. And once I started to realize that and realize that fear is the only thing holding me back, I've got the support of my family, and the worst that's going to happen is that, it doesn't work and I find a new lifestyle or a new position down the road. Once I reach that point, that passion and that drive to create and that passion and the drive to pursue the entrepreneurial lifestyle finally overwhelmed that fear, and I took the leap. That's not to say that since I took the leap I haven't been scared or haven't been fearful, because I most certainly have. But it's different. It's more a fear of, like, I've got to make this work. I've got to drive myself, than, less so a fear of, what if this all comes crashing down around me, or what if I royally screw this up?
So I want to thank you so much, Michael, for sharing your story. It is an inspiring one, and I hope all you listeners out there today can grab some inspiration, some motivation from Michael's story to get over that hump, to get out of that rut that is holding you back. So thank you, Michael. I hope you also draw some inspiration from our next guest, Mark Steele. Mark's a good friend of mine, and just like Michael and just like Fraser Cameron, who we're going to hear from next, and just like me, Mark has had a journey to a life of freedom and fulfillment. He worked for a very large corporation, making good money, cash, and a good paycheck, but something was missing. And, he had to overcome fear too. Wife, kids, mortgage. But after a while, that desire to change, that desire to achieve more, to achieve the life he was destined to achieve, became greater than the fear. And so Mark's going to share his story now. Mark is now an international speaking coach. He teaches you to be confident in your presentations. His company is Present Your Success. And right now, Mark is going to speak to you about his journey to overcome fear and to escape to a life of freedom and fulfillment.
Hi there. Curt asked me to spend a bit of time talking about my experiences with fear, most specifically in my career. Many years ago, when I first started working in corporate America, I worked for a Fortune 100 company. I had a good job, making good money. I really enjoyed the people that I was working with. But I was actually, over time, realized that I was quite unhappy. And that was because I was always feeling fear. I had a sense of fear that I wasn't good enough to work there. I wasn't smart enough to keep up with all the changing products and services and technology. And that was because I was putting way too much weight in my own limitations as opposed to my strengths. Most specifically, I put way too much weight in the fact that I didn't have a college degree, and most everybody that I worked with had bachelor's degrees, and many people had master's degrees or more. And I let that fear of being as smart as them, fear of knowing everything that I may ever be asked at any point throughout the day, hold me back and let me focus only on those things that I was lacking, as opposed to my strengths, those things that I did well. It wasn't until sort of many years of struggling with that that I came to understand that number one, the fear was really hurting me. It was making me depressed. It was affecting my home life as well. And if I didn't turn it around, that more bad things would continue to happen in my life. So I really sort of reflected and came to understand that fear is really about getting me to pay attention. That is, say, this is a new situation, or think about how you can best grow in this particular situation. Fear is not about don't do it. Don't get away. You shouldn't be in that situation because you're afraid. That's not why fear exists. Fear just has us stop, think, pay attention, and persist. And it wasn't until I changed my relationship with fear and came to focus on my unique strengths as opposed to things that I lacked, that I was able to be very successful in my corporate career, which actually propelled me to having the confidence to leave that corporate career and start my own business. But when I made that decision, again, the fear would kick in and say, well, what if your business isn't successful? What if you don't get any clients? Nobody pays attention. And so I had to go back through that same process and say that don't think about all the things that can go wrong. Think about all the things that can go right. Stop, pay attention, think this through. Don't just fly off and quit when you have no money. So fear is good, and in that it got me to think my business through, but it's only so good as long as it's not holding you back. So I thought things through. I made good decisions. I'm learning from mistakes or setbacks, things like that. And most importantly, I've learned to climb every day. Success is measured in inches. And so I just keep persisting, keep learning, keep climbing. And that's how I've come to have a much better relationship with fear and not let fear hold me back from growing. I hope you too have an opportunity to understand your relationship with fear in your life, and working with somebody great like Curt is going to help you do just that. Thank you for a few minutes listening to me as I talk about my experiences with fear. Have a wonderful day and climb on.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks so much for sharing your story. You know, as we've heard from Michael and Mark, overcoming fear ain't easy. And sometimes it takes several years to do it. Unfortunately, sometimes it takes a lot of pain before that pain gets so great that we can't help but escape, that we can't help but break free. And our next guest is someone who I've had on the podcast before, Fraser Cameron, who's from New Zealand. He's a competitive sprinter. And, you know, Fraser was in a situation where he was in a very successful corporate job, had that paycheck coming in, but it was slowly killing him. Physically, he was getting out of shape. He found himself getting grumpy, working late hours, not being present mentally and physically with his family until one morning his son said, "Daddy, why are you so grumpy?" You know how Fraser reacted? He up and quit his job, and now he's a very successful international coach. He's my coach. He's got the Epic Dads and Epic Moms program teaching you to be an epic parent. And here we have Fraser Cameron telling us about his journey to overcome fear and escape to a life of freedom and fulfillment.
I remember sitting and staring out the window at work, daydreaming and wishing I was anywhere but where I was, sitting in the office, in front of the computer screen, twiddling my thumbs, wishing the day was over. I used to turn up to work, and first thing in the morning, I was counting down to leave and go home again, because it really was completely unfulfilling. It made me angry. It made me frustrated. I was working with people that just wanted meeting after meeting to make themselves feel good. surrounded by narcissistic people who felt as though they wanted to be recognized for this amazing work that they thought they were doing. And then the other colleagues were zombies, all like me, just staring out the window. And I remember being absolutely petrified about what to do. This was all I'd ever known. I'd spent 10 to 15 years building this career and had done well out of it in traditional, conventional terms and been successful, but was empty and lost. So the self-doubt kicks in, the questioning all the decisions that you've made kicked in. So you end up then in a vicious cycle of not wanting it, but being too scared and too full of doubt to actually make the leap and do something else. So it becomes a perpetuating cycle of disappointment, frustration, unhappiness, misery, and anger. And it's so ironic that the very thing we're told to pursue is the very thing that actually generates all the feelings we want to avoid. And doesn't generate any of the feelings that we actually are truly after, of freedom, fulfillment, and happiness. And look, for years, I promised myself I would take the leap. And for years, I came up with 1,000,001 excuses as to why I couldn't, as to why it was too scary, as to why it wouldn't work, as to why I would let down my family, as to why I would not get what I wanted, that the grass wasn't greener on the other side, and that this was the best it would get to. The stories we tell ourselves are so crippling, are so paralyzing, and we end up starting to believe them. We don't believe them when we first say them, but after a year of saying them, after 2 years of saying them, after 5 years of saying them, they become so ingrained in our psyche that we believe them. And that whole argument of our perception being our reality is so 100% true. What we perceive to be real becomes our reality. So I was stuck. I was too scared to take the leap. And really, it came down to a statement that my son made when I came home from work one day, when he asked me why I was always grumpy, that prompted that leap. Suddenly, it wasn't just me that I was impacting, it was my family. And that was the change. My role as a father overtook any fear or self-doubt I had, and then I took the leap.
So there you have it. I really hope, first of all, I thank Michael, Mark, and Fraser for sharing their stories. Sometimes it's hard to share your story and be vulnerable, so I want to thank them so much for coming on the program and sharing their story. I hope you draw inspiration, motivation from each of them. If you have any questions, send me a note. I can hook you up with Michael, Mark, and Fraser. I'm going to put links to where you can find them, to their LinkedIn profiles, in the show notes. And so thank you, Michael, Mark, and Fraser. And thank you so much for listening today. If we were able to just provide a little bit of a spark for you to take that next step to breaking out of your comfort zone of misery, to breaking into a life that really moves you toward a vision that at the end of your life, people are going to say about you something that is more than just your work and your career, but they talk about you in a way that is your legacy, that makes you proud, that you want your kids to hear, that you want your grandkids to hear, that you want perfect strangers to hear about how you conducted your life, your work, your family, and yourself, because that's what vision is all about. And yes, achieving that vision, working for that vision, living that vision every day can be scary, and it takes overcoming fear. And so I hope today's podcast helped you in even some small way to overcome that fear and make a move in your life for change. This is Curt Mercadante. You've been listening to the Freedom Club podcast. Thank you.